All right, we're live. This is Linux class, week one. My name is Steve. I'm teaching here. I've been teaching this class for probably the past,
About to be
4
4 years now. Since
years?
When I was a senior in high school, yeah.
Okay, so 4 years. Dan Alberghetti, a friend of mine, was teaching it prior to that, and I'm basing a lot of what I'm doing this year on what he did in past years. I'll be deviating a little bit. We'll be doing some probably different projects. A lot of the command line stuff will be the same. There'll be a lot of stuff that's the same. But just initially, I wanted to go over the week one assignment, which is to install Linux. For those of you who've done it already, awesome. I normally don't post my assignments early like I did this week. So I was really surprised to see like a bunch of emails about, people getting it done. So that's awesome. And I normally post what I'm doing for the week. And what I'll do is I'll make basically here in the lab, I'll basically talk about and do what we're going to be doing for the week on my machine and presenting it through Google Hangouts. So you can either join live, which I don't believe anybody is, and even if they were, it's a new link now, so hopefully someone joins. But if you are remote, you can join through the Hangout and ask me questions. Otherwise, you can come in to the lab, ask me questions. It's really kind of a dynamic thing, so if you have questions, make sure to ask them. It helps because I sometimes tend to go fast. I've been doing this for a really long time, and a lot of this stuff to me is pretty basic, so I can really fly through it. So if there's anything where you need me to stop, re-explain something, go through something again, let me know. One of the advantages of putting this on YouTube as well, this goes directly to YouTube, and after I'm done with today, I'll actually put the link to the YouTube video on the post so you can go back and watch it. And then that way, if it is just I am going way too fast, you can pause and kind of keep up with what I'm doing. So it's the magic of the intertubes. So the very first thing I wanted to go over was getting and installing Linux on your machine. Now, I recommend having a physical computer to do this with. If you don't, having a virtual machine is probably the next best thing because you can still run your computer and your virtual machine. And I'm actually going to go through the installation today in a virtual machine, but I'm already running Linux and actually the distribution that we're going to be installing. But the process would be very similar on Windows. I posted a link to download VMware. I think they renamed it. It used to be VMware Player, now it's VMware Workstation Player. But it's free and it works great. I actually use it at work for a couple test local VMs that I have that I don't need all the time. So, and for those of you who don't know, I actually have a full-time job other than teaching. I'm just an adjunct. This is kind of my fun time and get to share my, passion of computers and technology with people. So, I like Linux. I like doing this stuff, and I hope more than anything, you guys have fun and can enjoy this because it might be a little bit strange, a little bit esoteric, but honestly, this class, I actually first took it from Dan a long time ago, probably 10, 12, no, what was 04? 12 years ago? Yeah, so I took it 12 years ago from Dan.
Old.
What?
You look old.
12 years ago from Dan, and it honestly, everything I learned in that class helped me in the job that I'm doing now. So, it's useful stuff and it's fun, I think. But I'm a nerd like that. So the first thing I had was go to Get Fedora and get. Oh, serious?
Losing the net.
I don't think so. No, we're good. And get Fedora Workstation. I've already downloaded it, so I don't need to go through this. But when you do go to download this, it does offer a lot of options. But the big one here You just get the live image, and you either burn it to a CD. I actually did that earlier today, or you put it on a USB. And one of the ways to do it on a USB, or if you're doing a virtual machine, you can actually just hook the ISO up directly to the virtual machine. If you're doing USB, which is actually a pretty good way to go, live USB creator. Oh, I posted a link to this as well. Once you have the ISO file, you can then run this live USB creator. This is what it looks like in Windows. And I don't know if I have it installed on here, but we're going to try. Nope. We're going to try installing it really quickly. 16 megs, so see how it goes. Sure the internet's working okay?
It's going, I think it's just my computer that's going slow, but.
Okay. Because, well, all right. It's just weird. It's acting very weird. I hope this broadcast turns out okay. This is something we'll get into in the later weeks of what I'm doing right here, but I'm basically installing this. In Windows, you just go download this exe and run it. But since I'm on Linux, I can't just go download that exe and run it. I have to install the Linux version. And so, hey.
Are you guys Linux?
Yep. Go ahead and get a seat. Just getting started, basically. So, anyway, once you run the live USB creator, you browse to an ISO, that ISO file that you already downloaded, and then you can select the boot or the target device, which I don't have a USB stick plugged in. Otherwise, it would show up in the drop-down here. Persistent storage, it takes a long time to create, and in the past I've recommended it, but almost if you're just going to be running off of it and installing off of it, you don't really need it, and it takes a lot longer if you do put persistent storage. Anyway, then you just hit create live USB. It goes through and installs it to your USB drive, and then you can stick that in a computer and boot off of it, which is really handy. It's way faster than using a CD, like a million times, or DVD, sorry, million times faster. It's almost like using, an SSD, because effectively a USB thumb drive is a SSD. So that's that. If you guys have any problems with that specifically, let me know. I can kind of maybe help, especially if you can come in. I can go over the processor.
I'm going to be doing it on the VM too, so if anybody needs help, I might be able to help them out.
Yeah, and I'm actually going to be running. I've already set up my virtual machine. I named it improperly. But instead of installing VMware, I have a native what's called a hypervisor. It allows me to run virtual machines in Linux that's built in, and I just installed this virtual machine manager, which helps me manage them. And I'm going to go ahead and start it. I'll actually open it up and show you some of the settings. I set it to the CD-ROM drive. It's to that Fedora Live Workstation ISO. And the boot options, it's set to boot off of the CD-ROM. And I gave it a 20 gig hard drive. For really all that we're doing in this class, you will probably need a bigger hard drive for your virtual machine. So I did 20 gigs because I wasn't thinking when I bought my SSD, and I only got like a 128 gig SSD. So I'm thinking space conscious. So I only gave it 20. That'll be plenty for me demonstrating what I'm doing today. I actually just installed my machine, so I'm pretty fresh. So a lot of the stuff that I'll be going over, I'll probably just use my native machine on. But for the install, we'll use that. I'm going to go ahead and start it. And when you put in the USB or start up your VM, you'll see this Fedora Live, and it'll say Start Fedora Live. It'll just automatically do it if you don't touch any keys, or you can just hit Enter to automatically start it up. And it presents you with a nice little Fedora logo splash. And then it should drop us to a desktop where it says try or install. Now, if you only have one computer and you don't have the availability to install and you want to run off USB because your hardware isn't quite powerful enough, I do recommend always going the try route instead of install. But for this case, we'll do install. I'm actually going to, I always get paranoid. I'm just going to roll with it. This year is going to be good. I'll just go full screen and we'll rock it. So I'm going to go ahead and install the hard drive. I don't know if you guys have ever done a Windows install, but this is like 5 times easier than Windows.
I don't know. Windows 10 is pretty easy to install.
I've not installed it from ISO yet.
I installed it from ISO when I built my computer. It was fairly simple. Just basically click yes. And
okay. Maybe it'll work. Oh, please don't tell me. All right, so it's not totally unresponsive. Oh, it was just being slow. Okay, so it asks you your language. I'm assuming all of you speak English. It is pretty amazing, though, how many different keyboard layouts and languages it supports. Even, some that you wouldn't think would be supported out of the box, especially with cubic character sets like Korean, Japanese. Yeah. I could give myself a challenge and do it in like Polish or Russian. But no, we're going to do English in the United States. This is actually the keyboard layout as well. Well, no, this isn't keyboard layout. Keyboard layout's up here. If you are using a different language, keyboard layout makes a difference. I did Irish keyboard one time by accident, and it messed up all of my special keys. Like the normal QWERTY was there and you could type, but like all the symbols were weird, and like I'd be trying to type a $, it would like do a euro or something. It wouldn't even do euro. It would do some different thing altogether. We're going to select our time zone, which in this case is Denver, and then we're going to select our installation device. In this case, I don't know why it's saying 0x1AF4, but that's the device I gave it. I gave it 20 gigs, like I said earlier. And so I'll just hit done. It's got the check mark, so that means all I have to do is select, basically go to the screen and hit done. And it's going to save that, and then I'll hit begin installation. And this should be ridiculously fast. One thing you want to make sure is you at least want to create a user, a super user. So in this case, I'll create me. My username will be Steve. I want to make sure this user is administrator. I'll talk more about that later and what that means. But basically, that just means that you can be an administrator in your box, and you want to do that, especially if you're the only person using it. Now, if you were in a corporate environment and you had 50 people logging in this machine, you may not want everybody to be administrative. But for this, keep it simple and be an admin. And I'll just make a stupid password like password. It's very weak, I know. Even it warns you, like not only here, but down here, it says the password you provided is weak. This password fails a dictionary check. It's based on a dictionary word. You'll have to press done twice to confirm it. And so I confirmed it. Now it's installing. So now that I've got a couple minutes here while this is installing, I kind of wanted to talk about what Linux is, the history of Linux, and I guess why it's popular. Firstly, Linux is a Unix-like operating system. It was written by Linus Torvalds in like 91. I think the first release to Usenet was in 91. I forget. It was in September, wasn't it?
I
Sometime.
have no idea.
Um, I just pulled that out of my hat. It's somewhere in '91, though. Linus Torvalds put up a clone of Minix, which is a version of Unix he was playing around with in school. He was interested in operating systems, and he wrote his own. He wrote a clone of an already existing Unix operating system called Minix, and so he released it to the world. And for the longest time, it wasn't called Linux until someone later attributed, Linus Torvalds. Linus and Unix would be Linux. And so that was in 1991. And it was pretty revolutionary for the time because there were other Unix-like operating systems that were free and open source, meaning that you could go and download the source code, compile it, and run it on your own machine. And this is back before, especially with Unixes, they didn't provide you an installation CD where you could just pop it in your computer and go. It was kind of a complicated process because they give you the source code and you had to compile it yourself and make it work on your hardware, which you had to know very intimately the hardware you were working with and everything. And Minix was cool because it came on a floppy disk and it ran from that floppy disk. And in those days, that was kind of a big deal because that was about all they had for sharing. I mean, yeah, CDs existed, but no one had a CD burner. So that's where it started. Linus Torvalds back in '91, and a lot of people picked up on it because it was free. They could download the source code and not have to pay. Unix, which was developed by AT&T in Bell Labs, you had to pay thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars just to get the source code. Whereas with Linux, Linus just opened it to the world for free. And so people downloaded it, started customizing it, started making it their own. Kind of right out of the gate, there were two big competitors, and they're still kind of big today. They're not really competitors, but two different philosophies on how to package Linux together in what is called a distribution. Because Linux itself is like the engine of your computer. Like, it does all of the work for your operating system. What you see on the screen, that's like your desktop manager, your display system. That actually doesn't relate a whole lot. Like, down at the very, very core of everything is the kernel. And that's what Linux is. It's just the kernel. And also,
That's kind of where the open sourcing comes in.
Everybody can kind of contribute. Open source is great because everybody can edit, everybody can make changes. And actually, the open source movement started back in the late 70s, early 80s by Richard Stallman. Well, I wouldn't say he started it, but he was a big part of spearheading. That was done, by the way. I just hit quit, and I will go ahead and I'm still running off the live CD, so I'll just restart the computer. And since I'm a little paranoid still, because I had so many problems last year, this is how you can tell you've installed, because it'll say the name of the kernel before it starts booting. Looks like we're still good. Even got audio still. Awesome. And so now it's booted. It's ready to go. That was basically all I wanted to go over for week one, was just getting it installed with a basic user. I didn't talk really about root accounts, and they're not necessary. If you don't make yourself an administrator, set a root password. Otherwise, you can't make any changes to your system. Oh, I forgot my super simple password already. So anyway, Richard Stallman, back in the 80s, he started his own clone of Unix, and he called it GNU, which stands for, it's GNU, and it stands for GNU's Not Unix. It's a recursive acronym, which is, it's one of those geek humor sort of things. But he started, instead of starting at the kernel, he started with all the userland tools, like, for example, the shell, which you use. And in those days, the shell looked like, well, actually, I'll just drop you to a shell. Sim key controlled F1. Nope. F2. Holy crap, they're GUI shells now? There we go. So this is what it used to look like. You had a black screen with some white text on it and a blinking cursor and saying log in. And at the time, like Linus just wrote like the engine. He didn't write any of the tools or any of the programs that go along with an operating system. He just wrote the core. And Richard Stallman and his team, they started working on the userland tools, particularly Bash, which is the shell. It actually stands for the Born Again shell, because the original Unix shell was called the Born shell. And again, nerd humor, they thought it would be funny to change the Born shell to the Born Again shell. And Bash is actually the most popular Unix shell today. Like even commercial Unix providers will usually have Bash on the system. In fact, the world's most popular desktop Unix, OS 10, Apple OS 10, is a certified Unix, and their default shell is Bash as well. And I'll show you guys what this looks like. Those of you who are in the classroom, it really sucks.
You go to terminal, like an Apple terminal, this is
An Apple terminal is Bash.
Bash, okay.
Yeah, basically. And it's the same thing here. I can open up a terminal emulator on my machine. I already have one open, and this is Bash.
Oh.
And actually, if we do help, I believe, it'll tell us some information about it. Yeah, it's GNU Bash version 4.3.42, and it's released on, Red Hat. So Richard Stallman wrote these utilities, and Linus released the kernel. And because Richard Stallman hadn't quite got done with what his kernel was going to be called, they kind of married together, and these distributions were formed around kind of marrying those tools and free open source tools with this free and open source operating system. And they've made, a lot of people call it GNU Linux because it's a collection of GNU tools and the Linux kernel. And early on, there were two camps, like I was talking about before, and those really became, there were actually three, and all three of them are still around, like big names. There were a bunch of others, but three big distributions came out of it. That was Slackware, and I think they started around 90, well, they all, I think, started around 94. And please fact check me on all this stuff. I'm doing this all from memory. It was around 94. I know Red Hat started, Debian started, and Slackware started. It was either 93 or 94. Slackware might have been 93. So a couple years after Linus released this, it became at least usable enough where people were packaging it together with all these other tools and a display manager, X11, so they could have a GUI. And, the kind of modern Linux distribution as we know it was born. And each one of these distributions took a different philosophy on how to package things, how to update systems, how to be the kind of the best operating system they could be. And because it's all open source, they can all share from each other. And if there's a good idea, they steal it, or not necessarily steal it, but use it in their product. And everybody can benefit from everybody else's successes. And so, part of the reason why Linux, even over the past 10 years, has changed dramatically. Let's see if I can get, I want to show you guys a Fedora 4. This is the first Fedora I ran. I was right out of high school, and I installed it. I loved it, and I never looked back on my home computers running Fedora.
So that now
23. Yeah, and 24 will be coming out May or June. So this is a screenshot. This is perfect. View image. This is a screenshot from the very first Fedora core that I used personally. It had a menu up at the top. It had, traditional, icons. This was your taskbar down here. It showed all the running programs down here at the bottom. You had your virtual desktops here on the bottom right. It was good times. I have very fond memories of Fedora 4. and they're on a 6-month release cycle. So about every 6 months they release a new Fedora. So that was about 10 years ago. So it's changed a lot. I mean, you can see it doesn't look as, there were no Windows effects like here where everything kind of snaps back to the, I could see all my windows. I could see my virtual desktops. There are differing opinions on how GNOME 3, which is how this is what this display manager is called. People like it, don't like it. You can change it. If you don't like the way this looks and operates for you, you can change it to something else. It'll probably be week 3 or 4. I'll go over changing your default display manager, making it look like something else. So for example, this was the default how Fedora 4 looked, but I also was a big fan of KDE. So I ran KDE. Which they didn't have kids. Yeah. Let's do KDE. I'll just go a picture of KDE 3.5. I really liked KDE. And this is what KDE looked like. Same operating system, same system, same computer, but it looks totally different. I wanted to view. For example, it had a traditional, like, if you're used to Windows, it had the start menu at the bottom, and you had your menu stuff there. Looked a lot like Windows, acted a lot like Windows, and you can even theme it to look and act like Windows. So, and nowadays there are a lot of different things a lot of different window managers you can use. I'm not going to go too deeply into that because, like I said, I'll have an entire week where we just go into changing that and using a different display manager. So, wow, I'm used to having a really slow spinning disk and it's taking a whole hour. So I think that's going to be it for the official broadcast I'm doing today. I will stop. Ooh, I've got a viewer. Is it you?
No, it's not me.
Oh. Let me go to chat, see who. Huh. I wonder. Okay, well, hi, viewer. Anyway, I think that's it for this week. I'm going to stop the broadcast. I'll keep this open. It won't be recorded. Anything that's not broadcast, it won't be recorded to YouTube. So that's a good thing. It is still public, but we'll talk to you guys next week.